Hello, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. This is episode 139. Why am I not getting better? This is an episode about chronic mystery illnesses that seem to have no concrete medical basis or explanation, possibly linked to nutrition or hidden environmental factors. And that's kind of the focus of this episode with Esther Blum. She's a health expert who battled Epstein-Barr Virus and debilitating insomnia, and she won. And she's now coached literally thousands of women in how to kind of take back their health and permanently treat the root cause of their health struggles. She has done this by overhauling their diets and beginning to view food as medicine rather than just sustenance. She's also going to talk about putting autoimmune conditions into remission. So if this is something you struggle with or someone you know, so much can be done. There's a lot of information we'll share today, also knowing that you should seek the competent advice of a trusted health practitioner. And as we'll talk about in this episode, hopefully it's a functional medicine practitioner. You know, this is a really interesting time on the earth where it seems like so many things are coming down, right? And so many things are just right in our faces. And there's certain things we just can't ignore anymore. And our health is one of them. And a lot of times what we're carrying is not actually ours. It's generational. It's stuff we've inherited. There are certain inborn traits or genetic markers or inflammatory markers that we may carry unbeknownst to us. And oftentimes it just takes an outside person to kind of alert us to what those are. Please continue to follow me on Cherie.Burton Instagram, as well as Esther on Gorgeous Esther on Instagram. You can also ask to join our private Facebook group, Women Seeking Wholeness, where more and more offerings will be coming forward about how to help heal these generational issues and come into greater contact with your body and your soul, which equals your being. So Esther, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness.
Thanks, Cherie. So excited to be here.
Well, I can already tell this is going to be super inspiring, and I need it right now because I just took a 2-week trip to Europe and I pretty much ate everything possible in sight. It was kind of like when in Rome, you know? So
okay, but here's the question, right? So you ate everything in sight. Did you have GI symptoms like you do here? Did you have any problems?
No.
That's right.
I didn't even really gain weight.
That's right.
So let me just tell you this one story. So we were in Bath, England, and we went to this like super famous place where they did the Roman baths, and they had this afternoon tea that you could sign up for. It's like usually booked out, but we were able to walk in, and I am not kidding you. There was a pastry. You pay for each person pays like $28 or something, and they give you this tea and then all these literally like 5 plates of pastries. And we were looking around, it's like, this is just for us. And we're looking around and everyone's eating all theirs. So we're like, okay, I have never tasted anything more sublime in my entire life. So it's true. I think you do metabolize it differently. Yeah. When you're not in the shit, I'm like, oh, this, I'm vibing on this. I'm in the Roman bathhouse. This is a traditional English tea. I'm in England, right? So it's a whole different way of metabolizing for me. So it's interesting that you brought that up. Care to expound?
You were mainlining pleasure. And so, but the other thing is this, I have so many clients that have colitis or Crohn's and they can go to Europe and tolerate the food fine. So just a sidebar, it may not be the gluten that's the problem. It's how it's processed and the chemicals that are sprayed on, maybe a glyphosate intolerance, which is Roundup, which is sprayed on wheat in this country, but other countries don't. Yeah. And that is the real gut irritant and destroyer of the microbiome. So.
Well, let's talk about the microbiome, because I'm familiar with that term, and I know a lot of our listeners probably are, but how is that a disrupt? Well, what is it and how does that get disrupted to make you feel like crap, basically?
So the microbiome, it's really its own endocrine organ. It's the 4 or so pounds of healthy bacteria that occupy our small intestine. And so those drive everything from inflammatory responses to genetic expression of illness to, anything from SIBO to yeast infections to bacterial overgrowth to parasites. So to leaky gut.
It's kind of like Pac-Man, right? It's like little Pac-Man that are trying to like keep you, keep those bugs out.
They keep the viruses. And listen, most of us have, viruses or parasites, but with the right balance of healthy bacteria, your immune system manages it fine. And 70% of your lymph nodes line that whole small intestinal tract. So if your gut is healthy, not only is your immune system healthy, but also your brain is very healthy, because with a healthier microbiome, you can manufacture serotonin and dopamine in your gut. Mm-hmm. So if someone's stressed, if someone's having anxiety, if someone's having brain fog,
that's all linked to the gut.
It's all linked to the gut. It's the epicenter. It's like, I may be dating myself, but if you ever saw the movie War Games, right? And there was that big computer, Joshua, right? And like, that was the epicenter, right? It controlled like world domination pretty much. So, the gut, it's the same.
It's your center, your command. I know. And I think our old models, because I got my degree in psychology, and they didn't even talk about the gut related to mood disturbance, or, how toxicity could be contributing to some of our, the somatic issues that we face mentally, emotionally. And it was all up here. It was all in your head. Like, everything is about the brain. They didn't connect these other neuroprocessing centers, like your gut and your heart, to mood, which is like, I got a whole degree and no one even brought it up.
Dude, I have like 2 degrees, a bachelor's and a master's in clinical nutrition. And it wasn't until I studied functional medicine that we delved into that.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Wow. And it's talked about more, but it seems like it used to be kind of fringe, and now it's totally established. Like it's undeniable.
Yeah. And the science, the research on gut health is just, we are at the tippy top of the iceberg. Like, what is going to unfold in the next 10 to 20 years? It's just so exciting, because it's coming out. More and more is coming out.
So that's interesting you say that. I self-published a book on depression in 2007. And I interviewed this woman Dr. Jane Gagliardi, who is, she has 2 medical degrees, a degree of psychiatry and a medical degree in, she's basically an internist. So she's like the gut, right? The gastrointestinal system. And she told me that, and this was again in 2007, so it's 14 years later, but not that long ago, I guess, in the scheme of things. But she said, we've only discovered a small fraction of the neurotransmitters that are in the gut. We've only identified a small, and the neurotransmitters, are your feel-good chemicals. And it's like, we know 90% of your serotonin is produced in the gut, but she's like, there's other feel-good chemicals. There's other neurotransmitters. And it's like you said, we haven't even scratched the surface on it. It was interesting for her to bring that up. She said like, that is part of the new frontier in medicine, is seeing how those unidentified markers in the gut are contributing to all this disease, both mental illness and physical illness. So I thought that was super interesting.
I can't wait to learn more. It just shows you, like, the minute you think you know something, you're just like, I know nothing.
Medical really science really doesn't. They don't. Okay. So the microbiome is this terrain. I kind of like to think of it as like your terrain, like the soil that you're building the rest of your house on, or your plant, if you look at yourself as a tree or something, like it's your soil, it's your fertile ground. And that area, the gut, is a chakra area as well. I don't know if you've ever studied the chakras, but that's the second chakra, which is all about, from a deep divine feminine standpoint, womb wisdom, a gut instinct, a gut brain, creativity, all of it's the sacral chakra connected to your sexuality, and just all of this depth to who you are. So what can we do physiologically? Like, what can we do? This is your area of expertise, is understanding how all these things and these components to who we are work together for us to feel good. Because that's what we want, right? We just want to feel good. That's our goal.
So what's your question?
So where do we start? So like, let's just say most of us, and you and I talked about this earlier, like most of us know we need to eat clean if we want to feel good. And there's a little bit of resistance to that from an emotional standpoint. But I would love for us to start there. And then I want to dive into some practical ways that you can see helping to build up this biome and have that thriving internal environment.
Yeah. Well, the gut microbiome loves, first and foremost, it loves biodiversity, and it loves fiber, and it loves red vegetables and fruit, and red foods. And then it loves whole foods and real foods. So let's start with biodiversity. Okay. Variety. Most of us eat the same, 15 to 18 foods on average, right? We have the same things day in, day out. It's really important to rotate your foods, right? And back in the day when, foods were in season at different times, we did a better job of that, eating more seasonally. The best way to do that now is to shop at farmers markets. So you really understand that tomatoes don't come in till August or September. That corn is more late July, mid-August. That the smaller eggplants come in also in August. Like I'm going through what's in my fridge now, right? Whereas herbs can grow. I mean, I've grown cilantro all the way through snow in late fall, early winter. Herbs are really hardy and will survive more. But in other words, just rotating your food seasonally as much as possible. Okay. We don't have to necessarily eat berries all year round. Think of how fruits vary, think of how veggies vary. So try to get a variety there, because most of us, unless we invent new animals, the proteins are what the proteins are, right?
Right.
Again, you could have beef one night, you could have fish the next, you could have shellfish the next, you could have lamb the next, and elk the next, and bison and venison. So trying to rotate.
Or have a vegetarian night or two, right? Like
you can, yes.
I love that too. It kind of makes eating more of an exciting adventure as opposed to just the same foods over and over and over. It's really hard with kids because they have their favorites and
Yes. But, again, you can do a taco night where you prepare, 5 to 7 bowls of just different things, of chopped tomato and cilantro, and then beans, and then corn, and then cheese, and then, raw veggies on the side. And, I love like the combo meals or, stews, right? Where you just dump in everything, or soups, or there's so many different ways to diversify your diet. And then, with veggies, you can eat them pureed in a soup. You can eat them steamed, grilled, raw, right? Sauteed, there's so many different ways to prep. Juiced. Yeah. There's so many different ways to prep. And sometimes, I get into serious food ruts where I'm like, I don't feel like cooking anything exciting. But I can tell my family's super bored and is like, do not serve me another skillet fried chicken breast anymore. So I'll go to the library and just take out different cookbooks. Because when I buy cookbooks, I tend to pick like 1 or 2 recipes that I make over and over again. I'm like, this is silly. So I just go to the library, we take out a book. And if I really love it, I end up buying it. But that really helps too.
That's a good idea. I never even thought of going to the library to get a cookbook.
Yes. And then, of course, YouTube has all these wonderful cooking channels and all that things.
As I was listening to you, I was thinking like, just to keep creating adventure with all my extra free time. But I know of some families who choose like every month they choose like an ethnic dish or something, or not like maybe once a week or something, but it's the same, they choose a different country is what I'm saying every month. Ooh. And so they still eat their same foods, but they'll add in a dish from that country, and it's teaching the kids culture. And I'm like, I really want to do that. Like that, when you talk about that diversity, that would be an interesting way, different spices and,
Yes, totally. Right. The spices are really what make food so regional, is the spices and sometimes the grains, and the proteins, and then the cookware. A tagine is made in a clay pot with a dome that we don't really cook here. Here we tend to use skillets or glass cookware. So that also influences the flavors too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just making it an adventure, I interviewed, I think it was Camille Martin, and we had this discussion because she and I talked a little bit about body image. We talked a little bit about some of the resistance we have to eating clean and things like that. And she was kind of saying like, yeah, when it starts to feel like a burden to do food prep, when it starts to feel like overwhelming, when you feel like you have to put too much mental energy into it, you won't do it. You'll just grab something that's not in your highest good, right? So for me, it's been half of this battle is like taking the time to cultivate it as an art form, or because I don't mind cooking, but if I have the choice of what I really need to get done and cooking, the cooking goes by the wayside. So except on weekends.
Let's talk about that. Okay. So the eating clean thing, we put intense pressure on ourselves to be perfect. I would not expect perfection. But a couple of steps will go a long way and really support your goals in this. Number one is cleaning out your pantry and just getting rid of conventional flour. There's a million gluten-free flours. There's grain-free flours. I mean, you can bake with coconut flour and cassava flour, and those can be FODMAP friendly, maybe not coconut, but cassava flour, I believe, is FODMAP friendly.
And what does that stand for, FODMAP?
FODMAP, it's basically a diet low in fructo oligosaccharides.
So it's like an additive, or?
It's great for SIBO, for treating SIBO and some yeast overgrowth, or just a lot of gut inflammation. So it's much easier. It's foods that are easier to digest.
Okay.
And have a certain fiber structure in them. That's like the simplified version of it.
So that was the other thing, is your body does love the fiber, but we tend to go to those refined foods to get the fiber because we know we crave it, but we're going to like refined flours.
That doesn't really have fiber though. The refined flours.
Okay. But what I'm saying is, we think we crave fiber. So we're going to the sources that we think contain it, but they're empty of that fiber.
That's correct. That's correct. So cleaning out the flour products is one thing. Okay. And just setting your house up so that you have, baked goods. I make meatballs, and instead of the binder of flour, I'll use potato starch, which is an excellent binder and very gut friendly and easy to digest. If I make cookies, I have, cassava and coconut flour, or I have like gluten-free flours that are ready to go and super delicious. And like, no one knows, no one can taste the difference or even notices. So make substitutions. And then the other thing is, when you want food prep, like I literally go through Trader Joe's and Whole Foods, and I go and snap photos of all the things that are pre-made that you can buy. And then I email them to my clients or text them. So there's, Trader Joe's and Whole Foods both have pre-cooked. Not only do they have whole chickens with skin on and bones intact, but they also have prepared chicken breast that's already cooked, clean. And all you have to do is chop it up, toss it with, a dressing of your choice, and put it over some steam frozen veggies. And you're done. Like, you don't have to make it complicated. Or, you can buy pre-cooked shrimp cocktail, right? You can buy pre-cooked burgers that you just heat up. I've seen those. So like, peruse the frozen section. Okay. We've all been caught with our pants down, and no one wants to cook 7 days a week. But the problem is, when we go offline and too far, and just pick what's easy, is that erodes our confidence down the line. Yeah. So if you can just muster up just 10% extra energy and say, oh, okay, either I'm going to order takeout, but that's within my zone, right? And just choose how I'm getting foods prepared. Or I'm buying pre-prepared foods that are quick and easy that I can just pull out of the freezer and defrost and heat up and throw in the toaster oven, So that's also really important, keeping bags of frozen shrimp on hand, which defrost and cook so easily. Frozen fish defrosts really quickly in like 10 minutes in a bowl of water, and then you cook it for 10 minutes in the toaster oven. So there's no sweat there. Those things are easy. You can buy bags of pre-cooked rice or grains in Whole Foods as well. It's a pouch. You literally empty it into a pot. And add broth and butter and onion and garlic powder and some parsley flakes. And it tastes like freshly made. So I have many, many shortcuts because often I am working right until it's dinner time. And when I leave my office, I go downstairs and I'm like, okay, now I've got to start. And there's an hour ahead of me. So I'm like, what can I do that's quick?
I used to set aside time every Sunday night. I kind of got away from this over the summer, but I used to set aside time every Sunday night to kind of plan that week's meals. But what I found I did is I was creating like 5 or 6 elaborate like dinner plans. And I didn't keep it simple enough. I had all these recipes I wanted to try, and I thought, the best laid plans don't always work. So then I was like, okay, now I just scale this down. So for me, it's just like, I'm only going to plan like 2 or 3 nights. The rest will just be those simple things you're talking about, or leftovers, or something in the freezer, or whatever.
Yes. I mean, God bless people who make recipes. I'm like, recipes. Like, honestly, I remember trying to follow, there's a local chef who I love, and she makes all these amazing recipes. She was like, oh, this is so easy. An hour and a half later, I was still prepping the food. And I said, screw this. I'm not doing this. Like, I get it. Everyone loves the flavors, but I would say my family, if they're like, ho hum, I'm like, guys, have at it. Here's the pots and pans. Here's the oil. Have at it. Because I'm like, we serve 2 dinners in my house. Take it or leave it. Okay. So if you don't like it, either step in to help or just zip it. Because I hear that. You gotta balance.
I cannot tell you how many times I've made like these really cool recipes and put my blood, sweat, and tears into all the prep and the whatever. And they're like, ew.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's dive into, I want to repeat those. So the gut biome loves biodiversity.
It loves red fruits and vegetables. Okay. So strawberries, red peppers, cranberries, purple cabbage, which is close.
Raspberries, strawberries, all the berries.
Cherries. Yeah. The gut loves those. And then we talked about, so fiber, great sources of fiber. You can make chia or flax pudding where you just put 2 tablespoons of chia or ground flax seeds into 3/4 cup of nut milk, and you shake it well or stir it and then store it overnight in the fridge. And then that's just a nice form of fiber that's like liquid Drano for your insides and just moves things through.
It's like little broom. Isn't chia kind of like little brooms? Like that's what somebody told me. It's like sweepers.
That fiber actually lowers high circulating levels of estrogen. Okay, so it really holds on and binds estrogen, and pulls it out through feces, through bowel movements. Yeah.
Because we have a lot of those, what do they call them? Xenoestrogens, or those bad estrogens? Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. So biodiversity, fiber, red fruits and veggies. And was there another one?
There was a while back, but
I forgot it, but we'll come back. I'm sure. What I'm super interested in talking to you about are these kind of mystery illnesses that you talk about having. There's a lot of these chronic mystery illnesses where people are super fatigued. They have these interesting symptoms where they're not being alleviated by traditional means of medicine, even alternative stuff. And so they're just like, I don't even know. What have you seen to you talk about reversing those symptoms?
Yes.
What are the symptoms that you're seeing, first of all?
And I mean, I could even speak on myself. I'm like the queen of mystery illness, and I have been for the past 14, 15 years since childbirth. Right. So,
since you started having children, it kind of disrupted things.
Yeah, I just have one son, but my sleep went to the gutter, just in wild insomnia, and then horrible brain fog and bloating, weight gain, and depression and anxiety and all these things where your lab tests come out. I'm describing you because it was me too, where your labs are normal. You go to 5 to 10 doctors. Everyone tells you you're fine. You're fine. And one doctor literally gave me a copy of the Kabbalah and told me to put it under my pillow. I mean, WTF. And then was like, by the way, start taking Xanax so you can sleep. I mean, really, it was I was like, wow, I'm so writing about this because this is the biggest gaslighting I've ever experienced. And women especially are just so dismissed and gaslit all the time, which is why
our whole medical system is built on the male body. Everything from our medical manuals and institutions is built on the male body. So
That's right. And most research studies are done on men. Most medications are done on men, but there's like almost no clinical research on birth control pills, but here we are taking them as women. So that's a problem. And so, yes. So when people come to me and they have these weirdo symptoms and all this GI distress and inflammation, or they're going through menopause and they're not, they're just a mess. Menopause is not a mystery illness per se, but the symptoms, they're told you're normal. This is normal for your age. Okay, but what can I do? Oh, you just got to wait it out. No, you don't have to wait it out. So I've developed kind of a chain of command of how I look at and explore a person. So right now for my patients, I do, before they even walk in the door, I have 3 sets of metabolic tests done. Okay, one is blood work, and I do comprehensive look at inflammatory markers, blood glucose monitors, and insulin management, and comprehensive thyroid function, and autoimmune markers, and just red blood cell, magnesium and zinc, vitamin D. Just take a whole big picture snapshot.
Which is that functional medicine model that you were talking about earlier. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just say that has to be the new frontier in medicine. That has to be where it's at, because there's no other, people are not getting well. Well, you have to look at the whole thing.
Yes. And as a dietitian, I have picked up many of my clients' autoimmune disorders, their blood sugar disorders, and the doctors will either not test for it or know about it and literally take no action, which is egregious. It's medical malpractice. So we cannot let people fall through the cracks. So often I partner with my patients and I am their advocate and go between the doctor and the patient. And if the doctor just isn't amenable, or just it's whatever I'm prescribing is outside their wheelhouse, I just send my people to a functional medicine doctor that does medicine. So I also do stool testing and I do hormone testing. And so in the stool testing, I will look for, and these are kits that I send to your home, so you don't have to even go anywhere. So the stool testing rules out parasites, bacteria, protozoa, bugs, and worms, but it also looks at dysbiosis. It looks at inflammation. It will look at gut permeability, and it will look at gluten intolerance and whether or not you're actually digesting your food and absorbing your nutrients. So it's a really wonderful deep dive into your gut health. And then the hormone tests I look at, we'll check everything from the neurotransmitters in your brain. So I can look at someone who's taking an antidepressant and tell you, hey, is it actually raising the neurotransmitters in your brain or not? Because if it's not, you probably don't even need to be on it, right? Also, I look at your production of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and then I look at the metabolic pathways that they go through. So I make sure, A, are you producing? And B, if you are, is it going down the right pathway, or could this potentially cause DNA changes that are precursors to cancers? So because the biggest fear women have, and men, I do work with men too, is, hey, if I go out on hormones, like, am I going to develop cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, breast cancer? Like, what's my risk? So we do look at methylation pathways as well to make sure you're detoxing properly. Because if you're not, I don't even start you or recommend hormones.
Yeah. Well, and methylation is huge for mood. And some people genetically have that, what is it, MTHFR or something?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have been methylating for many, many years, because that's just something I never picked up in the gene pool.
Yes. And guess what? Any chronic illness, if you get mono when you're a kid, that can also alter your genetic expression too, and turn on the genes that disable proper methylation. So yes, you should always check. And then I look at morning and metabolized cortisol, because this tells me so much about how your stress is being handled, what your adrenals are doing. if you're over exercising or not doing the right exercising, if your thyroid medication is doing what it should, there's like so much information. So so I will treat with diet, lifestyle, supplements, and send them to a doctor for a hormone prescription if necessary. Okay. But let's say we treat all that and people are still not progressing. They're like, yeah, I feel 20% better, but I'm not progressing. Mm-hmm. Then we look under the hood for more environmental issues. It could be Lyme disease. I have people do again, I send them to a functional medicine doctor. At this point, it could be Lyme disease. It could be heavy metal toxicity. It could be mold toxicity. I can tell you for myself, my functional medicine doctor and I, we cleaned up so many of my things and I got better with my sleep, but things just still weren't working. My cortisol was flatlined, so I lost the ability to exercise hard. I still exercise, but much lighter than I would like to. My sleep was still like really off. And so, and we did a mold remediation. Well, guess what? We still had more in the house that we figured out that we're doing a remediation for as we speak. And I had done 3 prior Lyme tests that the sensitivity wasn't good enough. I went to a new functional medicine doctor and he was like, yeah, you totally have Lyme and Bartonella. And I was like, thank God this is now in my head. We finally figured it out. We're remediating the mold. We're treating the Lyme. I will be fine in 6 months. You know what I mean? So
that's really empowering, isn't it?
Oh, it's so empowering. And people are like, oh my God, are you freaked out? I'm like, no, I'm freaking relieved because I finally have an answer. And it always enables me to help my patients, which I'm very grateful for. So you always want to make sure you're peeling back the layers, right? If it's not gut and hormones and diet and lifestyle, like if that's not making a dent. And believe me, if someone presents as Lyme, I'm like, go get a Lyme test. But sometimes those can be very well hidden. Sometimes also it's, again, autoimmune issues. There's so many other things. So that's why I run all the lab tests I do. And then absolutely bring in a functional medicine doctor to help when time comes.
I would encourage people to find a functional medicine practitioner in their area. I've been seeing a nurse practitioner who's going to become a functional doctor. She's in training right now. And I've been going to her for 4 years and we do blood tests every 6 months. And it's made a massive difference in how I uptake not only the nutrients but she helped me all the way through the transition of menopause. So that was really like, whoa, there was this chemical storm happening in me. And it was, all the endocrine disruptors that I was using all these years and all these things. But for me, the empowerment comes from, it's kind of like you sort of modeled it with, hey, this isn't like a quote unquote death sentence. There's a sense of, there's an intention or a reason behind why this is showing up for me. Well, for someone like you too, who spreads awareness about these things, sometimes you have to bring it into your body first before you can teach it. Unfortunately, that's all too common. But you mentioned something about a Dutch test when we were discussing things earlier. DUTCH. What is that?
That's a dry urine test for comprehensive hormones. So that was the urine test that I just talked about with the cortisol and the neurotransmitters and hormone production. So that is very, very helpful. Now, if you're treating all these though, and you're still not getting better, especially your cortisol, then I always look at something more environmental of like what's getting your toxins down, because chronic illness and or toxins in your house will knock your cortisol down to a flat line. And it takes over your immune system. Mold totally annihilates gut bacteria. So I kept doing all these GI maps on myself. That's the stool test I talked about. And I was like, God, I'm like actually getting worse. And it's because the mold just wasn't drying out. We had cleaned up some areas and put in drainage, so we weren't getting water in our garage anymore, but the moisture is still coming up from the ground or the air. So we were like, okay, now we're going to put in a system that just totally dehumidifies, the garage, the mudroom, the basement. So
interesting.
Okay.
I have a good friend.
Mold can't grow in those environments. And
it needs the moisture. Yeah.
Yeah. So then we bought really amazing air filters and that ionize and clean up the air. And then we'll dry everything out and we will retest the mold in our house and make sure everything is dry and clean. And clean, like for those of you, with duct work, you want to make sure that the coils are cleaned in your dehumidifier and you put in a good UV light because that purifies all the air coming in.
That's a lot. Like that, it's great that you went to that. I have a friend, I was going to say, I have a good friend who had to move out of her house because of mold. Like it was making her so sick. And even when they moved to the other house, they had to sterilize and wash everything that was going, like clothes and things like that were going from the old house to the new house.
Yes. And, every house most houses have a mold issue. So you can relocate and you should if your house is just overcome with mold and it's insurmountable, unless you tear the house down, right? But if you have some and you've isolated to a particular area, the goal is to remediate that area. And then if you can just get ahead of the mold, your body's immune system will course correct, and you do some good gut cleanup. It absolutely will course correct. And that's the big takeaway I want to give from this talk, is not to scare the hell out of everyone, but to say,
our bodies are so adaptable.
Bodies are adaptable, and things are, you can put things into remission for sure and reverse. And we also put in an infrared sauna in our basement, which is so cool. That's also. I
have a red light.
Yeah, awesome. Whatever you can do. I mean, even if you're in an apartment, there's portable infrared saunas that fold up and fit in the closet, and then they come out in a sleeping bag. Yeah. So super, super cool.
So besides mold and what other environmental disruptors have you seen that are creating mystery illness for people?
Yeah, well, Lyme disease is huge and rampant. And I mean, most ticks that we get bit with are like the size of a poppy seed. So you can do a tick check and still not find anything, or it goes up in your hair, or, your scalp. And it's not only Lyme, some people take a Lyme test through Quest or lab and it shows negative, but the co-infections are not being tested for. And the co-infections often wreak more havoc than the Lyme itself. So you absolutely want to get a sensitive Lyme test. There's a company called Galaxy, which makes a really good one. And a good functional medicine doctor who's seen a lot of Lyme will treat you to that. And then also, again, heavy metal toxicity. I mean, we all have heavy metals in us, so it's getting your body to really excrete them on a regular basis. Because it's even if you have no mercury fillings, it's in the air, it's in the environment, it's in the food we eat. So, those three things tend to be the biggest disruptors in causing mystery illness and these bizarro symptoms that don't fit into the conventional medical model for testing. Like a lab test won't pick it up. It may pick up hey, your white blood cells are a little off, or your eosinophils are high. Your body's fighting some non-specific infection, but we don't know what it is. Right. Or autoimmune markers, thyroid issues. Thyroid issues are huge. So in my 20s, I had really bad mercury toxicity. I'm like the canary in the coal mine. But I had really bad mercury toxicity, and my thyroid died. I packed down 20 pounds. I was 5'3" and 120. So I ballooned up to, and I was super lean and lifting weights. I ballooned up to 140, 145. And I was in 3 months. And I was what the heck is happening to me? I tore my dress all the way up to my butt, getting in a cab en route to a wedding, because I didn't want to try on. I knew I'd gain all this weight, and I didn't want to try on my clothes before I went to this wedding. I was so mortified. So my mom crammed me in the dress, zip, zip, zip. And it was my fat just exploded over the sides of the dress. And I was totally crying. I was oh my God. My mom's don't worry, we're just going to throw a cardigan over it. Right. So we get in a cab to go to the wedding, and I just go to lift my leg to like step up in the cab, and like my seam just wore all the way up to my ass. And so I was like, oh my God, like it's the worst, right? But I was like, clearly something is wrong. And it took me 3 years to find a practitioner who was like, oh, you've got mercury toxicity. And in 6 months, I was like detoxed. But meanwhile, I had like the most irritable bowel. I literally had accidents. Like literally, I was like, this is crazy. Within 2 weeks of treatments, had totally normal bowel movements. Everything was solid, and like my brain fog cleared up, and I was like, wow.
So you had to go through all of this, like self-experimentation, and you know, like deep dive into this because of you had to, out of necessity.
I had to.
Mold toxicity, mercury, heavy metals. What was their other?
Oh yeah.
Environmental.
Those were the big ones. I did have some Epstein-Barr, and severe insomnia. And that is all.
I've heard that most people have some form of Epstein-Barr, that they've picked up the virus somehow. Yeah.
Yeah. So as a kid, I was like super sick every month and was on antibiotics for chronic tonsillitis and ear infections. So once my tonsils were removed, then that all quieted down. But after pregnancy, I think it just blew up again. And pregnancy and menopause can sort of reignite Epstein-Barr and Lyme too. Like you can have, once you have Lyme, it kind of can go into remission, but it can mutate and reappear. So the key is to always I feel like every year. So what's the takeaway, right? I feel like you got to get your labs tested. I feel like every year, if you've had Lyme, you kind of need to go through, I would keep those herbal antibiotics on hand.
Mm-hmm. I use a lot of essential oils and a lot of herbs and tinctures.
Yeah.
Antibiotics. I had to be on antibiotics in my early 20s for 1.5 years, which totally destroyed. I had a staph infection.
Oh my goodness.
And, from a cut on my back, and it was horrible. But then I also had mono my first year of college. So I went from having mono to then in my 2 years later having that staph infection. And I think my immune system was just shot from the mono, and then destroying the gut biome so I had symptoms of deep fatigue for many years until I started doing my own research for my own. For me, and I think I told you this earlier, a lot of it is the emotional stuff, because you can usually, by the time you have a physical manifestation or a physical symptom appear, there's some emotional sensitivity or energy of emotion that's been circulating in that for a while. So when you talk about these transitions women go through, like having a baby or menopause, some of these markers, it's going to trigger that because it's such an emotionally charged life event. So it usually takes an outside stressor or something happening in your life before those things that are dormant are going to just come to the forefront.
Yes.
Like explosion.
I'm so glad you brought this up. Okay. So this is a big part of my healing, but again, I see it in my patients too, because trauma can really alter your cortisol curves. Mm-hmm. Okay. So something I always ask, on the intake interview is, have you suffered any physical or emotional traumas or abuse, sexual, physical, emotional? Because those can absolutely turn on the genes for chronic illness. And they can also really affect your adrenals in the long term. And so a lot of people, for example, if you're into chakra work, that the throat chakra, right? Well, that houses your thyroid. And so, I've witnessed so many of my patients who had severe trauma in their younger years, or even, older, like going through divorces, the thyroid got hit really hard. Hashimoto's got hit really hard. I know for me, it turned out, I thought when I went to a trauma specialist, and it's Dr. Wood at the Inspired Performance Institute, I cannot say enough amazing things about this human. He is a gift. But when he and I did work together, because I was like, there's something still missing. I'm going to explore past trauma. I had some past childhood trauma abuse. So I was like, let me explore that. And he was like, that's not actually your trauma. Your trauma was childbirth. And I was like, oh my God, because that's when I stopped sleeping. Hello. He was like, you were trying to solve the puzzle all night. Like, was I breastfeeding right? Was I doing this right?
Yeah.
I don't know. My son was a terrible.
Because you did have childhood trauma. You wanted to overcompensate and not pass that on to your own child. In some way, shape, or form.
That too. Yes. But it was literally just the trauma of my husband had a terrible ski accident 2 months before I gave birth. So I was nursing him every 2 hours, changing his ice packs, working until the day before I went to labor, and then going into labor so exhausted and clueless, and breastfeeding and working. And I wrote 2 more books. I mean, I was so depleted. Once we worked on that, I literally went from taking a stack of sleep supplements at night to nothing within 2 days. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Unhealed trauma is massive for health. Massive. I mean, and it's not, I always tell people, like, it's not like you have to go deep into the shadow of it. You just have to see it. You just have to acknowledge it. Like for you just to even know what it was. Like, that's literally the whole battle. It's just like, I see you. I'm not going to push you down anymore. Like, like you went through hell. Like, that was hard. And just acknowledging that.
And forgiving yourself. Like, if you experience childhood trauma, like you were a child, hello, how are you supposed to know what's right and wrong when you're 6 years old? Like, there's something wrong with you. Something awful happened to you, but it's not your fault. You didn't bring it on yourself, and there's no shame or guilt, really. There's nothing you did wrong. You did the best you could at the time, right? So I love the movie Rocket Man, where this isn't a spoiler alert, but at the end, like Elton John hugs the younger version of himself. The adult version hugs the child. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. Like, so powerful. I get teared up talking about that's it. That's
totally. We talk a lot about nourishing the body and watching what's in our environment, and making sure that, we are feeling supported, we're nourished, we're safe, it's clean, it's bio-friendly, whatever. And that same holds true for that inner child, right? And holding space for ourselves and loving ourselves and nourishing ourselves emotionally. For me, that's like, what I see is when people have these chronic mystery illnesses, they get depression. It's like a comorbidity, whatever you call it. And so they go together, and you don't know where one's leaving off and the other's is beginning, because when your physical self is depleted, your emotional self takes a dive. They're married. They're on the same spectrum of your body, your whole self. So it's like, I tell people, like, if you have the flu, are you going to want to, are you feeling happy and cheery? And, no, like, when your physical self is down, you're down emotionally. So when you have somebody with these ongoing chronic illnesses, it's like really hard for them to get the energy to food prep, to get the energy to do these things, to research. So really, I think it comes back to just take one thing at a time. So if you could give people like 1 or 2 things where they're just like, okay, I feel empowered. I feel like I can move forward with my health journey and kind of unpacking whatever's happening in my body. Yeah.
First and foremost, optimize your sleep. Okay. Sleep. Without sleep, you're a goner. Okay. So,
which we learn as young mothers. And you brought that up. Like, when you're sleep deprived and you have little kids, that's hell.
Oh, there's a reason why sleep deprivation is a form of human torture. Yeah.
And psychosis.
Oh yeah. I was like, oh my God, I could survive Guantanamo Bay at this point. Come on. So, okay. Optimize your sleep, like shut your phone off by 7:45, 8 p.m. Nothing good happens after that time. Let's be clear. Shut off your phone, get the blue lights out of your bedroom, keep it dark. Stay on a sleep ritual where you go to bed 10:30, you wake up at 6:30, whatever time you go to bed, wake up, same time every night. Okay. Then the next thing is buy foods, just again, keeping this super simple. Buy, when you can't have the energy to cook, buy as many things that are simply prepared as you can, and don't feel shameful or guilty You're still taking care of your family. Your kids have, 3 hots and a cot, as we like to say, and plenty of love in the house. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Just focus on just one foot in front of the other. When I was like the sickest of sick and could barely get out of bed, I just was determined to make my bed every day. I was like, no matter what, make your bed. Even if you want to make it later to take a nap, just make your bed. That symbolizes setting yourself up for success. And I managed to walk every day, no matter how little sleep I'd gotten. I was like, just make your bed and go for a walk. And if you do those 2 things, you won the day. So keeping it simple.
Those are great.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, Esther, how can people find you online, and I know you're offering freebie. So do you want to share with our listeners?
Great giveaways. Yes. So for 5 of your listeners, Cherie, I've opened up my calendar to accommodate 5 custom tailored 30-minute consultations. This is a consultation where you and I get on the phone. You leave with 3 customized takeaways to help you reach a specific health goal. This isn't like, don't pick my brain about things. This is like, I need help solving this health puzzle, or my relationship with food, or losing weight. Nice. Get on the phone. We strategize. So you go to estherblum.com/call, CALL. Esther
and your
Blum.
last name is spelled BLUM.
BLUM, and it's Esther is ESTHER. So estherblum.com/call. And then if you want to learn how to really just start optimizing your health, I have a wonderful 3-part video training series. If you go to estherblum.com and enter your email, you will receive my 3-part Crush Your Cravings series.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds spectacular. Thank you you just have a wealth of information about how these systems work together. And I'm sorry you had to go through all those mystery illnesses, but I'm also not sorry, because it's powerful. No, it doesn't matter what field the woman's in that I'm interviewing. You're like my 139th interview or something. Like, it doesn't matter what her field of expertise is. She had to go something in her being and in her body to render her the expert. Like, she had to live it. And so you lived it, and you get to disseminate that information and all that expertise to all of us. So I just honor that.
There you go. I have no doubt that was really the purpose of why I'm here, is really to just be the vessel and help other people. But note to the universe, like, I don't need any more.
I don't need to repent on any of that. I know. I'm like that too. I'm like, I don't need any more trauma. Thanks.
No, thank you. Let me get through menopause next, and I'll be good for quite a long time.
Thank you so much, Esther.
Thank you. Have an awesome day.
I meet a lot of people who are suffering from depression, who maybe, just feel so crappy in their bodies, and their spirits just want to soar and shine and be and do all these things. And they're just so limited in the confines of their body. And I hope this episode was helpful. I know it was a lot of information, probably a lot of science-based stuff that might seem a little unclear. So again, I would just maybe go back and rewind certain aspects of it so you can catch some of those tests that Esther mentioned. But for sure, molds, heavy metals, mercury, those kind of things that may be kind of lurking, especially if you have an older home or live in an environment that has a lot of humidity. So it's important just to get those kind of tests to determine those markers and see what might be creating or exacerbating a pre-existing health condition. Just following what she calls that chain of command in those certain tests, especially getting the right kind of gut microbiomes, right? Just thriving in your gut. So that biodiversity and fiber and red fruits and veggies and all those things that she talked about, and definitely hydrating. But I always come back to, what are the emotions that are underlying this? What is fueling the fire, so to speak, of some of these cascades of health symptoms and conditions? And so sometimes visiting a competent health practitioner that can help you identify what those are can be super helpful as you're working through the physical issues. But as always, just be gentle on yourself and take baby steps and make really small changes, one step at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time, oftentimes is really all we can do. So love yourself, practice radical self-compassion, have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you next Wednesday on Women Seeking Wholeness.